Buon pomeriggio a tutti. Con grande piacere oggi vi presento un mentore dell'arte del costruire e della trasformazione urbana, Alex Romer. Architetto e designer di fama internazionale, Alex ama definirsi carpentiere, perché in questa parola egli racchiude un mondo di significati, abilità e visioni. Nel 2012, quale parte del collettivo EXYZ, fonda Construct Lab, un pionieristico network internazionale di progettazione e costruzione, che non solo traccia nuove rotte nel campo architettonico, ma propaga l'idea di una progettazione partecipativa. Egli unisce l'atto creativo del progetto alle mani che letteralmente lo costruiscono, tendendo ponti tra comunità locali e il know-how dei singoli individui, dando vita ad un'architettura che si anima di persone, luoghi e storie. Alex Romer, attraverso la sua pratica, supera la tradizionale dicotomia tra progettista e costruttore, ricongiungendo queste due anime in un unico meticoloso approccio, dove l'immaginare, il progettare ed il costruire diventano un fluido processo collaborativo. Egli infatti ritiene l'architettura ed il design strumenti di intervento sociale, capaci di generare nuovi spazi dinamici di interazione, enfatizzando sostenibilità e cooperazione. Oggi avremo l'onore di ascoltarlo, mentre ci parlerà di Convivial Ground, Stories from Collaborative Special Practices. L'opera, edita nel 2023, dedicata al tema della convivialità e alla capacità di pratiche collaborative per innovare la cooperazione e la convivenza sociale. Nel 2022 Alex ha gettato le fondamenta dell'associazione Urbane Praxis, il cui obiettivo è facilitare una costante sinergia tra professionisti, amministrazioni e politici, nel promuovere un'evoluzione sostenibile delle città. Urbane Praxis è uno spazio d'azione che concepisce lo sviluppo urbano come impegno post- e transdisciplinare, unendo arti, cultura, educazione ed urbanistica in un approccio che esplora nuove modalità di coesistenza urbana. Come un equilibrista, Alex Romer si muove agilmente tra differenti linguaggi e discipline, portando innovazione anche all'interno della didattica, attraverso incarichi in prestigiosi istituti internazionali. Con una dedizione che sfida i confini del convenzionale, ci condurrà oggi tra i suoi progetti più significativi, che intrecciano arte, architettura e sfide sociali. Vi invito ora a lasciarvi ispirare da Alex Romer, il carpentiere equilibrista, colui che attraverso la propria opera ci ricorda che la costruzione è il primo passo dell'abitare. And now I hand over to Alex, carpenter and tightrope walker. Thank you, Alex. Thank you.
Works? Yeah. So thanks a lot for the invitation. Thanks a lot for this introduction, which was for sure much more structured than my own talk might be. I tried to articulate well and to speak slowly, because I just had a little talk with our dear translators that they need every now and then a bit of time to translate what I'm saying. Also, I guess I won't be very academic in my talk, so it's relatively easy to translate, I think. So the theme of the talk would be the conviviality. We call it, or we use that word, and I quote some people who use it further on in my talk. Maybe we don't use it completely right. Maybe we use it a bit in our manner, in our way. But we use it especially because we were not so satisfied with the idea of just a common. I mean, a common is, of course, very precious description. of a negotiated idea, of an arrangement, so people would talk to each other and come to a certain moment where they say, now we have the common ground. But our question was always, what would be after the common ground? So once I have the common ground, what is then? It needs, for sure, action and activity in order to translate the common ground into something which we call then convivial ground. On the other side, I'm also an architect. You said carpenter, true. But I'm also an architect, and I, in this talk, kicked out all the big architectural projects we did because I wanted to focus on the smaller things, and I wanted to try to translate a bit this idea or some ideas of how to come to a common ground in like sort of strategies. We call it tools. So that's our common interests and values. This will be the middle part of the talk. I will start to talk a bit about Construct Lab as a network structure, because I think this is also quite interesting to understand how this Construct Lab network functions. And then I wanted to, in the end, go to a sort of deep dive into one project where I develop a bit more the idea of the convivial ground, probably mostly through images. So about the Construct Lab, I was always wondering what is the thing which brings me to that kind of practice. And I think the most, or the biggest question actually was about the question on how to gather. And the answer is the most simple answer you can imagine. It is together, actually. In English, it's a bit of a word play, but it is the precondition for a lot of things you need to do. I mean, especially when you come from carpentry, you see that it's not easy to do things on your own. Sometimes you have to bring everybody together in order to make, to move, for instance, sometimes a bit stupidly on the left side, maybe on the right side, a bit more with more social or kind of pressure. But to move bigger things from A to B. And of course, it's also a way of pronouncing or kind of explaining or making a political act. Because in the moment you bring people together, you can come to that point where you have the power to bring ideas through. And it is a spatial question because it's often related to space. So how to generate a space where people can gather. The network I'm talking about is permanently moving. It started with more, gonna get some water. It started on a more collective practice, so we were 25. By the time Exist, you mentioned the collective, it was placed in Paris. And when that collective stopped existing, of course, the people still existed, but it was more about the question on how we work together. So we thought a network would be a very good continuation. We could every now and then call the members of the network together around projects, then generate new collective situations, but then also everybody has its local implication. It is quite an international network, so we can't share space all the time, but we can share those moments. And we have a couple of associations in Belgium, in Germany, in Portugal, in France, and in Swiss for the moment, which are organizing or structuring this bigger network. And then you have quite a lot of members. Some are already not very active anymore, and some others are maybe not even on the website for now. So, of course, a network, or the question on how people work together, is not only a question of rational reasons, but it's also a question of emotions. So there is a sort of real reason and good reasons to work together. Here in that graphic, you can see a bit the, let's say, more emotional reasons why we're working together. And as I said, the more rational reasons I develop a bit later. And it's a permanent question also on how that network functions. So we have no manifest, or never did a manifest, never put down rules. It should be something which is dynamic and open and should be negotiated in every moment. You can imagine that, or you might have the feeling of harmony when I speak about that kind of collective working situations, but I can tell you that that kind of image is maybe 1% of the time, and 99% of the time is rather conflict, which is actually, when you give it space, quite an interesting engine to develop new ideas. And again, it's a spatial question. So come to our tools, the common interests and values. I call them tools maybe because I'm a carpenter. Could also be principles or other words for it, but tools also is used by somebody we often refer to, Ivan Illich, who was criticizing in the 70s, but I think what he wrote down is very valuable for nowadays too. So he spoke about the convivial tools as something which then allows all the users to express their meaning in action, and that refers to what I said before. The convivial tool is the common ground in action. So I have a couple of tools listed here, and I will go through them and will show you some images to illustrate what I was saying. So working with typologies and what we call support structures would be one, the fact that we consider us not as experts, but that we rather develop situated responses by experts who are local people often, who know much better their situations, but we open up the spaces for it. That we tell collective stories where people can be involved. That time in our projects is not evidently a linear process. It has impulses, so it's a temporary moment, which then creates a more permanent story, like project story. That often our little design objects we do are not only meant to serve, but also to start conversations, especially also the critical ones, and that we would call maybe our practice not only designed to build, which is evident when you come from the building side, but also designed to repair, which is maybe a more important aspect in our times. Speaking about the typology, so this is out of our book. We define typologies together, so it is often a round circle. It can be within a project like that one where we're in need of a collective negotiation space for ourselves. It can be a mobile one which was about to collect all inhabitants somewhere in the north of Milan to start a new performance center. It can be a space to bring people together, such as the Lungomare project on the left side or on the right side with the feet in the water because of higher temperatures in France. And it can be also a very, very simple one, like that one on the left side, which is basically a couple of school chairs which get it a bit of extension and then allows already to create that situation where people would feel on a more horizontal level. So a little bit different than the situation we have now here, where I'm standing on the stage and you're sitting and trying to follow me. So all these different gathering places would be one typology we almost have in all of our projects. The other one is these spaces where we work together, because the fact to stop talking and to start working and making things together brings you into a situation where you can exchange on a different level. It's not only about what you're saying, but it's also what you're making, what you're having for ideas which you can realize together, etc. So there's a lot of those workshop spaces. Often they change over time, so they become very essential places while we build up the structures, and then they change and become more maybe playgrounds or more, let's say, workshop places, for instance, in museums where the outreach or the museum pedagogy can work in. But they are all related to the fact that you do something together. So I go a little bit faster through it also, but here we have, for instance, a workshop we call Workshop on Wheels, which was in tour through Europe, a mobile toolbox, which can in a couple of minutes stand on a place, develop a workshop situation. When it lifts its upper ceiling, then you can have a little office up there, or even can sleep overnight. And let's see, other workshop situations. And then there's often this moment, like in the beginning, where we need everybody together to carry something from A to B. Then, and that is of course very much related to conviviality, the fact that we gather to cook together, to eat together. So kitchens in all kinds of situations, starting with making your own cutlery, ceramics, getting in the people who have knowledge on the local traditions, for instance, jam making, or putting a mobile baking oven somewhere on the square and inviting people to bring their dough in order to bake the bread, which is also a very traditional thing in rural sites, where in the villages you often had one shared oven, which would be heated once a week or something like this, and then people could bring their dough and bake their bread. And also these very, very improvised kind of kitchen situations like those ones. Again, another oven. You see, the food has a big, food and eating has a big relevance in our projects. And then also the long tables, of course. So the one you see down on the right is a 140-meter long table, which went through Annecy. But you see the more simple versions on those ones here, up to the fact that there is still no table yet, but it is planned. You find on our website all kinds of those typologies, because we thought that it would be also an interesting way of accessing actually our projects, and through, for instance, the research of a nice design for a bar, or a nice design for a little kiosk, or just a bench or a stool. I remember my study time when I was in university. I was all the time looking for those like plans. Where can I get it? Open source was maybe not yet so developed. Of course, Enzo Mari is a big reference in that field. But to even make it more democratic in the sense that you also bring in a lot of different designs, and then sometimes happens that people send us an image of something they realized out of our references. Coming to a next typology, which I was calling no experts, situated responses. The question of coming in somewhere and being the expert, if you turn it around, you come in somewhere, you bring an idea. For instance, here we were also somewhere in France, and we were invited to explore public space, to get informations out of it that would eventually end up in a in an urban study. but the question was how to get the people together in order to get all those information. So we thought we'd do this mobile oven thing, went there. First thing we had to find was a mobile unit, something which was actually mobile. We didn't have it. So some farmer borrowed us a mobile unit. Then we pushed the whole thing through the village by our hands. So the other farmer had a bit pity with us and said, like, okay, here you get our tractor. Then we were with the tractor and the mobile unit. And then the most important moment was when the first fire started. We asked an hour little round, and who can bake bread? And actually nobody could. So we were again a little bit like, okay. But immediately people, of course, knew how to bake bread. And then we had, here on the photo, it's like one of the old village baker who came, who was already retired, but of course everybody knew him. And then through that situation, you develop so much, or you get in contact with so much other people. And also the whole kind of interviewing situation to get the information from the people is much more simple because they feel, they are important in the whole process. They are necessary. So they already appropriated something which would be more complicated to get done if you would know everything and to just show how to make things. Another side of that is this project we did in Portugal, where we thought about like a very nice summer 2013. Close to the Atlantic Ocean. We thought about a surf school. We thought maybe, the name says it's Casa do Vapor. We thought maybe about a steam house or something like this. But in the end, what it became was a public library. So it totally shifted program. And that was definitely like it was coming out of the fact that there was a real need for that kind of program. So being able to understand and to integrate those kind of design ideas is super important in our projects. It has a dynamic process. Sometimes you look a little bit stupid, because you don't know. You're not there the one who knows, but you're rather the one who doesn't know. But in the end, it helps to get them to make it really a good project. About the collective stories, it's also a way to make people, I always try to avoid this word participate, because it's a kind of controversial, but in this moment I think I have to say it, to make people participate in our project. You start to tell a story. For instance, here we were invited in London to work on a site somewhere in East London, so still in development by the time. It was a couple of years before the Olympics. And we proposed, because of our neighbor who was invited to do a wheat field, you might know her, she's called Agnès Denez, and we proposed to do a mill. So we built up that mill and started milling the wheat, which was graining the wheat, to flour the wheat, which was on the site. And then, of course, a bakery also established. And then out of that energy we developed in the 5 weeks being on site, a whole bunch of participants started to claim the place, to ask for a bit more funding, and initiated a garden project which is still open until now. If somebody from you goes to that area in Dalston, it's called the Eastern Curve Garden, and is a really nice embedded in the neighborhood project, which is also an example for those time as a non-linear process idea, because we had 5 weeks to activate a place, which gave an impulse and which ended up in a long-term project, which definitely changed the master plan of this area. Speaking about those little objects, what I call the conversation starters, the example would be a series of kiosks we did. So a kiosk, I mean, I saw one here in the street. It's a very conventional object in public space. Everybody knows it. Everybody knows that there's something to get. So you have that idea, but then you also use it as a sort of display for messages, for claims. In this case, it was in the middle of an exhibition, so we invited all the artists who were part to give some quotes, to kind of give us some pieces of their artworks. But then we also developed a second kiosk, which was then a mobile one. We call it the Kiosk of Solidarity, and which is an object which circulates since 3 years now through Berlin. We got every year a little bit of funding, not a lot, but a little bit, enough to invite 20 bottom-up initiatives, so initiatives who would, for instance, work on questions of health, work on questions of migration, work on questions which are society-related, but which where the people who are concerned might often have a problem that they can't enter institution, they can't enter, let's say, from the administration provided spaces. So you have to almost find them on the street and propose and start the conversation. But at the same time, of course, it's also a claim. It's also a question on, yeah, hey, have a look, here's a problem. And this one went through the city. It's still out, and it will be again out in the next year. So we can give them even a little bit of funding in order to organize a couple of days around that kiosk. So each initiative, I think we have now 40 or 50 initiatives who already used it for a little moment in order to show what they are working on. And then the third version of it is a version we made recently in Milan, related to a social cultural center, Stecca 3. We called it the Kiosk of, or now we call it rather the Kiosk for Reciprocity. And it was related to, on one side, the desire to step a bit out of the building and get in contact with people outside in the public space, but in the same time also to kind of reflect on the different social, cultural, hybrid spaces which are in Milan, which are all fighting for their rights, and which are often it ends up also in a little kind of concurrence situation. But in the end, it's again a way of, okay, you can have your voice, but you also have to understand that together you are much stronger than if you are just alone. And also in the way how they understand their social cultural spaces. Some are maybe more event related, some are more social related, some are more cultural related. So when you put them all together, you have a very interesting cultural quality. So the idea was that this, or is that this kiosk circulates and that it will pop up every now and then and help, hopefully, to support this social cultural network, which is existing in a digital platform, but the analog version of it would be hopefully through our little kiosk. All right. Now to the third part. As I said, I wanted to go a little bit deeper into one project, also to maybe respond a bit to this invitation to communicate on the more controversial aspects of our work, also like the balancing thing, yeah? Because I mean, in the moment you you go into you have a very conventional context, and you propose something unconventional, you have to deal with compromises, etc. Compromises. And in order to develop that project, I have to go a couple of years back, because that was a project which brought me and a lot of other French people from that collective exist by the time to Venice. It was the French contribution to the, I think, 10th Architecture Biennale. And it was quite a new way of approaching the idea of showing and kind of presenting architecture, because it was about generating the space to invite for debate and not only showing pictures and models of what that could be. In order to do so, again, all the infrastructure had to be developed. So there was a kitchen, there was a bathroom on top of the roof, we had a sauna, and we had a sleepover for 40 people. So the place was literally inhabited throughout the 3 months of Biennale. And while building it up, we encountered a lot of people in Venice, because we were a group of 30 or 40 people, and we had to feed ourselves, so people would buy in grocery shops in the neighborhood, etc., etc. So on all kinds of levels, we encountered people, and they came also after the Biennale and asked us materials, which was actually a practice they did for a while already. So it's about a group of activists in Venice. And they invited us again 2 years later in 2008 to come to Venice and to support with others, with a Dutch group which was called 2012 Architects by the time. I think now it's Super Use. Stalker, you might know from Italy. In order to develop a bit this idea of how you can reuse the Biennale materials and literally reuse the Biennale itself to rise its to get out some value for the let's say inhabitants of Venice and the city. So we together reopened a social culture center which is called Morion, which was closed down because of certain reasons for a while, and transformed it for one summer into a sort of material storage where people could get material from the former Biennale and work on their own homes. And the whole project started like this as a Re-Biennale and developed since. And in last year, we were invited back to Venice, this time by the German Pavilion, who developed the idea to use the German Pavilion as a material storage, again, to make to develop space of potential and to make these materials disposed and usable in the city. Of course, they teamed up with Re-Biennale, which is now a cooperativa, and they invited us to do a first prototype of a workshop before the opening of the Biennale. So it was somewhere in April, we were there, in order to test how that system can function. So the materials stored in the German Pavilion with a huge workshop, you can see it here. Also the way how they stacked materials, it has a very, was a very aesthetic structure also. And then they would bring in architects, universities, professors with their students, and invite them to team up with local groups in order to make little interventions throughout the whole summer. So the question for us was to kind of do the starting, try to see how it works, how do you get the material out of the pavilion. We were invited to work in Giudecca. Most of you know this, of course. So we had to bring the material over, we had to also understand a bit the place, and there's like a social housing area which was built, I think, somewhere in the 40s, and which developed over the time. So it came out of those garden situations in Giudecca, and was is now not only social housing anymore, but it is also a lot of private houses, but it is also squatted spaces. So this activists group developed throughout the years a very interesting and complex administrative structure to squat, sort of half legally, because all these houses they enter are public houses, so houses which are just closed because public housing cooperative has maybe not enough money to restore it, but also is not capable to give it over to tenants who would themselves restore the houses or the apartments. So what they do is they open it up, they pay rent to an association, and in the same time they restore the houses and create living conditions. But the interesting aspect of that place here is that you have all the three different occupations together. So you have these squatters, you have social like tenants, and you have private owners living here. And all together they developed a system of solidarity to use or to kind of maintain the space in between, and also to help each other on different moments of the, like when they are in struggle, especially of course the squatters. So they would invite everybody for breakfast, for instance, and then the whole squatting, like the whole how you call this? Like when they want to get them out of the houses, the situation is not so easy anymore. So they kind of soften it out. And here you see a couple of those restored houses, which are also a lot restored with the materials from the Biennale. So first thing was an encounter of all different parties in the area to understand where we could intervene, what would make sense, and where we could start to repair some collective structures. And we kind of opted on that little pavilion, which is a thing they use all together, and which allows them to inhabit the public space. We are also quite fascinated by these mobile little objects, where you also could find some old ones. So the idea was also to kind of look around what objects we could use and repair and make usable again. Of course, we encountered quite a diversity of inhabitants in this area. And we put together all these different ideas and started our process. We had 2 weeks' time, so we brought our tools. We got material, which was, of course, again, a form of negotiation, which material we could use now. Before the opening, we couldn't use everything, of course. Brought the material over to the cassette and started building, developing new ideas, taking out of our typology catalog ideas, and having a good time for these 2 weeks. Of course, always more and more people joined, because there was quite some curiosity about what we are actually doing there. And every now and then, again, some political movements happened. But it was, yeah, also like very, very simple things, like a little information box where people could pin their papers was neat. So the cassette info. Here's the restored little carriolo. And then some furniture around, etc., etc. So open for quite some ideas. And then was the question, what actually came up was that it would be maybe very nice to do the opening party for the German pavilion right in that area, which was a big shift because normally the opening party is very exclusive and you have to be on the invitation list. But here in this case, the idea was to really have a public moment and to make rather a sort of neighborhood party. And they asked us to design a bit the context for this opening party. And we thought, okay, but that will be also crazy because there will be 1,000 people. So if we put some new chairs there, that's maybe not interesting. But what we thought would be interesting is to kind of research on all the different claims the people working with us have and kind of put them on very simple structures, which you also know there, the washing lines, and in this sense make a layer which would float over the people's heads, so when you have the party, and which also would like slightly by not too coincidence enter the Instagram accounts and the social medias, etc. So we had a couple of interesting interviews on needs and claims, and transformed the space with all these little graphic panels in a way. And of course also this was then available for reuse afterwards. And you see that slowly the party filled up. It was also said that as it is in public space, the party has to stop at a certain hour. So it was clear at 10 o'clock it has to be finished. There was some other initiatives invited to do performances. Here it was about a very impressive performance about the conditions of cultural workers in Italy. They all had the backs of the Venice on their heads as a symbol of, or as a possibility to get into anonymity. And despite the little bit bad weather, there was quite some good party ambience. And you could also do your own T-shirt with a couple of those claims. And as I said, the posters are now circulating in Venice, so every time when they need it for a certain manifestation, they can get them out again. And that, yeah, it's a little movie of the night. This was before 10 o'clock, to say. So there was quite some ambience in an early hour already. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex, for this beautiful speech and presentation. And ringraziamo ancora Alex per questo bellissimo intervento. Ed ora chiamo sul palco Raul Pantaleo, architetto, e Giovanni Vecchiato, neuroscienziato, che ci condurranno in un affascinante dialogo dal titolo Architettura ed empatia. Grazie. Grazie.